satellites that you see orbiting around the Earth, and they push to you all sorts of content, including programming and broadcasting and internet. Believe it or not, they were his idea. The story that I am about to read today is called The 9 Billion Names of God. It was written in 1953 and is considered one of the classic science fiction stories. But the best thing that I like about this story is that instead of rejecting and ridiculing and scoffing at faith, it celebrates faith. May I present to you the 9 billion names of God. This is a slightly unusual request, said Dr. Wagner, with what we hoped was commendable restraint. As far as I know, it's the first time anyone's been asked to supply a Tibetan monastery with an automatic sequence computer. Could you explain just what you intend to do with it? Gladly, replied the Lama, readjusting his silk robes. Your Mark V computer can carry out any routine mathematical operation involving up to 10 digits. However, for our work, we are interested in letters, not numbers. I don't quite understand. This is a project on which we have been working for the last 3 centuries. It is somewhat alien to your way of thought, so I hope you will listen with an open mind while I explain it. Naturally, it is really quite simple. We have been compiling a list which shall contain all the possible names of God. We have reason to believe that all such names can be written with not more than 9 letters in an alphabet we have devised. And you've been doing this for 3 centuries? Yes, we expected it would take us about 15,000 years to complete the task. Oh, Dr. Wagner looked a little dazed. But exactly what is the purpose of this project? The Lama hesitated for a fraction of a second. Call it ritual if you like, but it's a fundamental part of our belief. Somewhere among all the possible combinations of letters that can occur are what one may call the real names of God. By systematic permutation of letters, we've been trying to list them all. I see. So you've been starting at A, and working up to Z, 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 Z. Exactly, though we use a special alphabet of our own. Modifying the electromagnetic typewriters to deal with this is, of course, trivial. I'm sure it is, said Wagner hastily. Go on. Luckily, with your machine, what would have taken us 15,000 years, it will be able to do in 100 days. Dr. Wagner was scarcely conscious of the faint sounds from the Manhattan streets far below. He was in a different world, a world of natural, not man-made mountains. Was there any limit to the follies of mankind? Still, the customer was always right. There's no doubt, replied the doctor, that we can modify the Mark V to print lists of this nature. I am much more worried the fact that getting out to Tibet in these days is not going to be easy. We can arrange that. The components are small enough to travel by air. If we can get them to India, we will provide transport from there. And you want to hire 2 of our engineers? Yes, for the 3 months that the project should occupy. Dr. Wagner scribbled a note on his desk pad. 3 months later, we find the 2 engineers, George Henley and Chuck, contemplating the end of the project at the Tibetan monastery. The Lama in charge of the project is addressed as Sam. The view from the parapet was vertiginous, but in time, one gets used to anything. George Henley was instead staring morosely at the distant mountains, whose names he had never even bothered to discover. This was the craziest thing that had ever happened to him. For weeks now, patiently, inexorably, the computer had been rearranging letters in all their possible combinations. As the sheets had emerged from the printers, The monks had carefully cut them up and pasted them into enormous books. In another week, heaven be praised, they would have finished. George heard the heavy wooden door slam in the wind as Chuck came out to the parapet beside him. "Listen, George," said Chuck urgently. "I've learned something that means trouble." "What's wrong? Isn't the machine behaving?" That was the worst contingency George could imagine. It might delay their departure, and nothing would be more horrible for them. "No, it's nothing like that." Chuck settled himself on the parapet. "I found what all this is about." "What do you mean? I thought we knew." "Sure, we know what the monks are trying to do, but we didn't know why. It's the craziest thing." "Tell me something new," growled George. "But old Sam's just come clean with me." "Go on, I'll buy it." "But they believe that when they've listed all 9 billion gods' names, the human race will have finished what it was created to do. And there won't be any point in carrying on. In fact, the very idea is something of a blasphemy." "Then what do they expect us to do? Commit suicide?" "There's no need for that." "Oh, I get it. When we finish our job, it will be the end of the world." Chuck gave a nervous little laugh. "That's just what I said to Sam. And do you know what happened? He looked at me in a very queer way, and like I'd been stupid in class, and said, 'It's nothing as trivial as that.'" George thought this over for a moment. "That's what I call taking the white view," he said presently. "But what do you suppose we should do about it? I don't see that it makes the slightest difference to us. After all, we already knew they were crazy." "Yes, but don't you see what may happen? When the list's complete and the last trump doesn't blow, we may get the blame. It's our machine they've been using." "I see," said George slowly. "You've got a point there. But this sorts of things happened before, you know. When I was a kid down in Louisiana, we had a crackpot preacher who once said that the world was going to end the next Sunday. Hundreds of people believed him, even sold their homes. Yet when nothing happened, they just decided that he'd made a mistake in his calculations and went right on believing. So let's just sit tight and take what comes. Another 7 days have passed. George and Chuck have said their goodbyes to the monks and are traveling down to the airfield. "I still don't like it," George said 7 days later, as the tough little mountain ponies carried them down the winding road. "I'm just sorry for those poor old guys up there, and I don't want to be around when they find out what suckers they've been." "It's funny," replied Chuck, "but when I said goodbye, I got the idea he knew we were walking out on him, and that he didn't care because he knew the machine was running smoothly and that the job would soon be finished. After that, well, of course, for them, there is no after that." George turned in his saddle and stared back up the mountain road. The squat, angular buildings were still hidden against the afterglow of the sunset. Here and there, lights gleamed like portholes inside of an ocean liner. How much longer would they shine, wondered George. He imagined the High Lama and his assistants would be sitting in their silk robes, inspecting the sheets as the junior monks carried them away from the typewriters and pasted them into great volumes. No one would be saying anything. "There she is," called Chuck, pointing down into the wind. "Ain't she beautiful?" She certainly was, thought George. The battered old DC-3 airplane lay at the end of the runway like a tiny silver cross. In 2 hours, she would be bearing them away to freedom and sanity. The swift night of the high Himalayas was now almost upon them. The sky overhead was perfectly clear and ablaze with the familiar, friendly stars. "Should be there in an hour," he called back over his shoulder to Chuck. Then he added, in an afterthought, "Wonder if the computer's finished its work. It was due right about now." Chuck didn't reply, so George swung around in his saddle. He could just see Chuck's face, a white oval, turned towards the sky. "Look," whispered Chuck. And George lifted his eyes. to heaven. There's always a last time for everything. Overhead, without any fuss, the stars were going out one by one. Toastmasters.
All the prepared speakers qualified?
Yes, all the prepared speakers are qualified.
Okay, all the prepared speakers are qualified. So please vote for the best prepared speaker. Just to recap, we had 5 speakers, a very competitive session. We had